And now to Stars and Gripes, where we take aim at the US media. First up, CNN's Jake Tapper. He has a lot to say now about Joe Biden's clear cognitive issues, but his integrity has been called into question because he sat on this apparent revelation while his own network covered it up.
Other people who were there, and we should note that the Biden White House falsely, when people showed that clip and asked what was going on, said it was a cheap fake. They did this all the time.
What the White House is calling cheap fakes, which means that there are videos that are being put out on social media and then amplified on conservative media that in some cases are just not right, and in other cases are highly, highly misleading.
I think what the White House and Biden campaign, what they have an issue with is that these outlets are wrapping these videos in very misleading context, right? Saying that this is evidence that Biden was freezing. He's unable to walk off stage on his own, and that's obviously not the case.
Cheap fakes are a little bit simpler. They're cheap. They're just distorted, out of context videos, chopped up in certain ways, constructed in certain ways. That's what we're seeing. That's what the Biden administration, the Biden campaign is so worried about right now.
Well, joining me now for his first time on the show is comedian and the host of his own show on Blaze TV, Alex Stein. Alex, thank you so much for joining me. This whole notion of cheap fakes that really dominated, I guess, you know, the halls of CNN before that notorious debate by Biden, where I guess it was no longer advantageous for them to lie anymore. It's now, I mean, Jake Tapper to invoke this, it's kind of incredible.
I know. It just shows you how hypocritical the media is here in America, especially CNN. They could care less about actually telling a truthful story. They care more about bias and slant, and they had to protect Joe Biden for his entire presidency. And, you know, to be honest, CNN, they did an okay job. I can't believe that they saw the same clips that we saw during his whole presidency and had the gall to sit there and try to articulate that he was being a good president too, you know, with all the people watching their show. But they have no audience now. CNN is dying because of that. So what Jake Tapper's trying to do is he's trying to be a revisionist with the history and trying to say that, oh, well, we were misled, we were bamboozled, instead of admitting that it's the media that bamboozled the American people.
It's almost not a good argument because you want your journalists to be a little bit better, a little bit less foolable.
Well, of course, and that's the thing is they have no credibility. It's like, imagine if they would have been a little bit harder on Biden. I think that they would actually help with their viewership. People are like, oh, well, at least they're being honest. But they're just so dishonest that they protect Joe Biden when he couldn't even walk off stage. And I think one of the most alarming stories was that what pressured George Clooney into writing the letter that Joe Biden should step down was that he interacted with Biden at an event and Joe Biden didn't even recognize him. And that's pretty bad considering George Clooney is one of the biggest A-list superstar actors in the world. So I think that if that story is true, then that was not just the first time that Joe Biden misremembered or didn't remember a very important, influential person's, appearance or who they were. So it's obvious he had a cognitive decline, but they like that because they wanted a president that they could just use an auto pen and get through all their legislation. And they wanted a president that wouldn't give them any kickback. And Joe Biden was, he was kind of the perfect Manchurian candidate.
Now to a more serious topic, South Africa. Donald Trump has granted white South Africans asylum, and because of their race, MSNBC has attacked the asylum seekers and made some rather extraordinary claims.
Trump has virtually halted refugee admission in America for people fleeing war and famine in places like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Back with Rick, Mark, and Eddie. Rick Stengel.
Yes, it's so deeply and morally wrong-headed and repulsive. These are the descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid.
Every year, dozens of farmers are brutally murdered and there are hundreds of attacks on innocent people. So what on earth is MSNBC suggesting? Their ancestors did wrong, so either the attacks are justified or it would be immoral to intervene and offer them asylum?
They're not directly responsible for it, but it was a system that actually moved black people off of the arable land. So they inherited the land that the black people had to give up. It was called forced removal. It was something called a Bantustan policy, where they moved black people out of the cities and farmlands into these remote areas with non-arable land. I mean, it was just one of the most worst processes ever.
Well, the reason he is saying this is to provide a justification for the murders. He went on to say that there is no injustice here. Now, this is pretty deranged stuff from a major network. Alex, let's bring you in. MSNBC obviously has a track record for putting some of the most appalling content to air. I remember that they had the wall of all these extremist dictator leaders that they were comparing Trump to at one point. And then you had Joy Reid walking along, basically insinuating that he was as bad as Putin. So they do this kind of thing with the rhetoric. But in this situation, it goes against the whole left-wing narrative about race, that it should not form a foundation of criticism. That is until you have struggling people who just happen to be white, who are given asylum, and then all of a sudden the left is turning on asylum seekers.
Well, you're exactly right. And this is not a popular conservative position, but it's a position that I have debated a lot of times. And I would say here in America, we do have systemic racism. In the 60s, it was systematically, oppressing black people. But now currently we have systematic racism that is against white people. And people are going to call me a conspiracy theorist. Then why do we have DEI programs that are causing qualified white people to not even be interviewed for jobs? It is 2025, and we're having Black Hawk helicopters collide with American airline, planes, killing nearly 70 people in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And Donald Trump, what did he say after it happened? He blamed DEI. So we need to have a meritocracy in this country. And yes, this country was racist, and during apartheid, they were racist during black people. But I thought what we were supposed to learn through civil rights is that it's not good to be racist. It's not good to be systemically oppressing people. And that's what's happening currently in America to white people. And I'm not saying that I'm a victim, but if these South Africans, if they were a different skin color, the narrative would be completely different. So I'm not the crazy one. MSNBC is the crazy one for code switching and saying they'll help out a Venezuelan Trinde Aruga gangbanger, but you're not going to help out a white farmer that is, under constant threat of murder, where he's trying to grow crops, trying to support his community. So, it's a bad situation, but systemic racism, sadly, it does exist, and it's really bad here in America.
Yeah, well said. Now to a scoop by The View.
There's one other thing that's also very interesting to me, because President Trump, as you remember, called Haiti a certain type of country. As it turns out, our new American Pope has Haitian and black roots. So we actually have a black Pope. Apparently, it's like chef's kiss for me. So apparently, both of his maternal grandparents are described as black, Haitian, or mulatto in several census documents. And on their marriage license, the grandfather's birth place is Haiti, listed as Haiti. Her birthplace is listed as born in New Orleans. They were identified as people of color, but in 1920, when they migrated to Chicago, the census reflected their race as white.
So I'm loving everything about this Pope.
Again, Alex, it's very similar thematically, isn't it? The person's race becomes the predominant factor over whether someone is good or bad or needs help or deserves help. And just moments ago, you had a situation where the Pope was this diabolical person in the eyes of The View, but then they find a racial link that they happen to like, and all of a sudden they love him. It is honestly astonishing.
Well, they're not even trying to hide it, especially the ladies at The View. I mean, they have, not the highest IQ in the world. But, okay, when it comes to, how they're getting mad at the Pope or, before, and then now all of a sudden they think he's a black guy and they love him. I just want to say I was a little skeptical of Pope Leo at first. I'm like, we have an American Pope. This doesn't feel real. I feel like the Pope needs to be born somewhere near the Vatican or something. But I'm telling you, the more I find out about Pope Leo, that his brother's a MAGA supporter, the more I like Pope Leo too. So for once, I have to admit, I agree with The View. At first, like I said, I was a little skeptical. American Pope, this doesn't seem real. I've been to Italy. I feel like the Pope needs to have some sort of Italian presence, but according to the rules, Pope Leo is qualified. He's grew up in Chicago. I love America, so I'm actually happy with the Pope, and I'm happy that I can find one common thing to agree with the women of The View, because that's hard in this day and age.
I love it. Alex Stein, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it.